Warframe has many abilities that scale in a weird way. Some deal practically no damage when you don't understand how to fully build for them. But you are able to create a spectacle of damage numbers when you do. One example of this are Warframe's Pseudo-Exalted abilities. But you might ask, what in the world are Pseudo-Exalted abilities? Pseudo-Exalted abilities are abilities which inherit mods placed on their respective weapon type. For instance, Khora's Whipclaw or Gara's Shattering Lash inherit mods that are placed on your melee weapons. This includes mods like Blood Rush, which help increase the critical chance of these Pseudo-Exalted abilities. In this video, I will cover all the current Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities and what I think are the best ways to build for them. I will also test out the new melee Doughty arcane and see if this arcane is actually worth using over options that were already available before the 1999 update. Back in the day, before update 23 released in 2018, we did not have the ability to mod exalted weapons directly. Instead, exalted weapons, like Excalibur's Exalted Blade, would use the stats of your equipped melee and the mods applied on them. This meant that way back when, the best stat stick we used to have were the Prisma Dual Cleavers, as these boasted a large increase to crit chance and crit damage multipliers. If you are unfamiliar with what a stat stick is, let me quickly explain. A stat stick is a general term used across different games to signify a weapon that buffs other parts of the gameplay. This can be abilities, other weapons, or it can provide things like speed boost. Usually the stat stick itself is built in such a way that it facilitates you reaching these goals, while the stat stick itself is never or only rarely used. Now, after update 23, some abilities remained without an exalted weapon, which can directly be modded. Instead, these abilities work similar to how the old exalted weapons used to work, hence the name Pseudo-Exalted. A full list of the currently available Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities is as follows. First, there's Ash's Bladestorm, then we have Atlas's Landslide, then Excalibur's Slash Dash, Gara's Shattering Lash, and finally we have Khora's Whipclaw. First, I want to cover the most used stat sticks for these abilities, which are the Magistar and Ceramic Dagger incarnon. This is because the incarnon perks of these weapons will apply on the Pseudo-Exalted abilities, enabling a choice to increase base status, base crit chance, and base crit damage. This is particularly good on Pseudo-Exalted abilities that start out with a 0% crit chance, 0% status chance, or a 0 times crit damage multiplier, as these new base stats can then be scaled by the mods present on the weapon of choice. The Ceramic Dagger incarnon lets you choose these increases on the final incarnon evolution, where the best options are the 30% increased base crit chance or 30% increased base status chance, depending on what your build aims to do. The Magistar incarnon has a choice for plus 8% to base values of crit and status, or base increases to crit chance and crit damage multiplier, where the normal Magistar incarnon adds 16% crit chance and a 1 times crit damage multiplier, and the Sanctity version of this weapon will add 12% crit chance and a 0.2 times crit damage multiplier. This makes the normal Magistar a superior stat stick paired with a slightly higher Riven disposition. One benefit for Pseudo-Exalted builds using the Magistar as a stat stick is the use of Magus Aggress on your operator, which can be activated by switching back to your Warframe when you perform a melee attack while on operator form. Normally, this buff is consumed on melee attacks. However, while Pseudo-Exalted abilities will be buffed by this crit chance increase, they actually do not consume the buff, making you able to keep this up indefinitely. Then there are also some general bits and bobs that count for all Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities as well. For instance, the melee combo counter will affect all Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities by increasing their final damage by 25% per multiplier gain. This means that you can get up to 375% extra multiplicative damage when at 12 times combo, or 400% when you are using the Vanka Prime melee, which can build up to a 13 times combo due to its unique effect. Another general thing for Pseudo-Exalted abilities is the use of the Uras Kubro or the Shade Sentinel companions that can provide invisibility. This can be done by using the mods Ghost on your Sentinel or Stalk on your Kubro. Normally, this invisibility is consumed upon attacking. However, casting abilities is not counted as performing an attack, enabling you to stay invisible throughout the use of these abilities. This then also enables the use of the new Arcane Crepuscular that adds a final ×3 critical damage multiplier, as well as a 30% increase to ability strength. However, the Panzer Vulpavila companion that provides viral priming through its viral quills mod is also a very good choice, as this will massively increase the output damage on all of the abilities that will be discussed in this video. One very good ability to use for Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities is Wrathful Advance from Kalervo. as this is a flat crit chance increase that applies after mods, causing you to easily hit tier 3 or tier 4 crits depending on your ability strength. However, there are also some general things that do not work on Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities. For instance, range mods won't affect the range, faction damage mods will not be used, and condition overload will actually not work on the output damage of these abilities. Now, let's start off with Ash's Bladestorm, which is by far the most convoluted Pseudo-Exalted ability on this list. This ability will let you mark enemies, after which clones will deal true damage, shown as slash. This ability has two separate parts. One part is ability damage, shown by the violet numbers, and one part is weapon damage, shown as a normal white number, or yellow if you hit a critical hit. The ability damage will be dealt 3 times, while the weapon damage only applies once after casting. The speed at which the ability occurs can be scaled by using attack speed, but this is capped at 50%, so there's no need to build for loads of attack speed. Ability damage will be affected by the following. First, there's Steel Charge, the aura mod. Then there's Savage Silence from Banshee, if you have subsumed silence onto your Ash. Then there's Radiant Finish from Excalibur, which is the augment mod for Radial Blind, which you can subsume on your Ash. Arcane Fury will work, as this is a base damage increase. Arcane Blade Charger will also work. And finally, Viral Stacks will also help increase the damage of this ability. The weapon damage part is able to crit like I said, and will inherit the base damage, critical chance, and critical damage of the equipped melee weapon. This would suggest that it uses very old game code from even before 2018. Incarnon perks and weapon mods will apply to the weapon damage portion of the damage. Also, condition overload will not apply to either of the 2 damage parts, and melee elementalist will not be able to increase the slash procs. I also used the new Arcane Crepuscular to see if it would scale the crit damage, but it did not. And Wrathful Advance from Colervo was also not able to increase the crit chance for some reason. The weapon damage part can also be buffed by some melee arcanes, namely melee retaliation and the new melee doughty. One of the Bladestorm stat sticks, which has extensively been used in the past, is the Ceramic Dagger. While using melee doughty on this would seem like a no-brainer, it actually severely underperforms due to only the weapon damage part of Bladestorm being affected by the crit multiplier. This upfront damage is only applied once and does not affect the slash procs that occur, leaving you way better off building a classic Savage Silence build or a Radiant Finish build. These builds would use Arcane Fury on Ash and melee retaliation on your chosen stat stick. I would recommend using daggers in general for Ash's Bladestorm ability, as these have more options for initial combo. Okay, next up is Atlas's Landslide. Atlas's first ability Landslide deals 350 impact damage, scaling with ability strength. It has a 2x crit damage multiplier and a base 5% crit and status chance. When you cast it, it will smack enemies up to 12 meters away, which can't be modded by ability range, and once enemies are hit, it will deal damage in a 2 meter base radius, which can be scaled with ability range. While sliding around, Atlas will be fully invulnerable, making him very hard to kill when spamming this ability. Other abilities increasing the damage are Eclipse, which is multiplicative, but a lot less powerful after its nerf. Instead of this, I like using Wrathful Advance for damage, as it easily enables me to hit far into red crit territory. Whoa, hold on. Editing Casey here, real quick, to fire some extra info at you that I forgot to mention right here. First is that Landslide will scale with the combo that you can see on screen as ×2 and ×4. At ×2, your Landslide will deal 200% more damage, and the radius of Landslide will be increased by 200% as well. Furthermore, the base cost of casting Landslide is reduced by 50%. At 4 times, you will get a total 400% damage increase and a 300% increase to the damage radius, as well as a 75% energy cost reduction. Besides this, petrified enemies will take additional damage due to the vulnerability applied, but will also increase the effectiveness of the rubble that's dropped by 50%. On my Atlas build, I used the 2 augments for Landslide, which are Path of Statues to passively create petrified enemies while spam casting Landslide for additional damage, and I used Rubble Heap, which enables free casting of Landslide above 1400 rubble and multiplies the final damage and base Landslide range by 2, skyrocketing the damage and allowing you to hit enemies up to 24 meters away. Okay, and now I'll give it back to Casey in the past. I again used the Ceramic Dagger as a stat stick with melee doughty, using the status chance increase on the final incarnon evolution. Using this, I was easily able to get damage into the hundreds of millions with my companion build for the Panzer Vulpaphyla, which used Tandem Bond to build combo and Viral Quills for priming of enemies. You could consider using the Shade or the US Kubro, as I mentioned before, but since Atlas is invulnerable while casting and boasts a high amount of armor due to picked up rubble, I went with the Panzer for an increase in damage at at low and mid-level content. Landslide is also affected by arcanes like Arcane Fury and Arcane Blade Charger, but will also be affected by most melee arcanes, including melee exposure, which I will come back to in a little moment. I then compared the Ceramic Dagger incarnon stat stick to the Sancti Magistar incarnon, which is a bit worse than the normal Magistar. However, I didn't have this while recording this video. I also paired this with Magus Aggress on my operator, as you can trigger it and keep the crit damage buff when casting Landslide, as I mentioned before. On the Magistar incarnon, I preferred the crit chance increases over the other options. In the end, I preferred the Magistar incarnon as a stat stick for Landslide due to the fact that it can benefit from a massive 240% multiplicative damage increase in the form of additional corrosive damage from melee exposure, which cannot be used on the melee Doughty build. If you do want to go with melee Doughty, make sure you use Wrathful Advance for maximum utilization of the crit damage that it gives. Now down the list we go to Excalibur Slash Dash, which functions a bit odd. Outside of using Exalted Blade, it will scale based on your equipped melee mods, but when you are using Exalted Blade, it will use the mods installed on your Exalted Blade instead. This has to be actively considered when building purely for Slash Dash, as some important mods like Blood Rush cannot be equipped on your Exalted Blade, making it a much worse option for scaling Slash Dash. Excalibur Slash Dash is his first ability and deals 250 slash damage base, scaled by ability strength. When cast, it will jump to an enemy within 12 meters, scaled by ability range. Additional enemies are then automatically chained to as well if they are within a 7 meter base radius, scaled by ability range as well. The base stats of Slash Dash are as follows. It will have a 0% critical chance, a 1x critical damage multiplier, and a 0% status chance. The slash damage that's dealt will guarantee a slash proc afterwards. If you want to build purely for the slash proc, it is advised to go fully for crit chance, crit damage, and base damage, as elemental damage bonuses, such as melee exposure, will not increase the status damage from the slash status effect. Rather, they will only apply to the direct damage portion of Slash Dash. Again, just like with Ash's Bladestorm ability, elementalist mods will not increase the slash proc damage. I tested and used the following builds for max damage first, where I modded Excalibur for super high ability strength, a bit of duration, and some range. I also used Arcane Fury to buff Slash Dash. I then subsumed Wrathful Advance over his Exalted Blade, as this will not be used anyway and we fully focus on Slash Dash instead. One important mod to increase the damage of Slash Dash is Furious Javelin. This mod will increase melee damage multiplicatively and also works when using Slash Dash, skyrocketing the damage potential. Furthermore, modding for ability strength enables you to sometimes hit buffs up to 1000%, translating into a 10 times damage amplification. I then also used the Ceramic Dagger with melee Doughty to benefit from the crit damage increases paired with Wrathful Advance. For the final incarnon evolution on the Ceramic Dagger, I chose the base 30% status chance increase, as this will result in a massive crit damage multiplier from melee Doughty, and it will also allow Slash Dash to apply multiple slash procs on top of the one that's guaranteed. However, if you want to build more towards massive crits and upfront damage, you can feel free to choose the base crit chance increase of 30% too, as you can then scale this very nicely with Rivens, Blood Rush, and the Gladiator set bonus, which also makes you less reliant on keeping up Wrathful Advance, which in my opinion in the end felt a lot better to play with. However, with this build, I quickly ran into survivability issues when facing nullifiers or when recasting Javelin and Wrathful Advance. So I revamped the build that I showed before using the same amount of Forma, but I took a slight hit to ability strength to facilitate the use of Rolling Guard to give me a 3-second invulnerability window whenever I want to recast Javelin and Wrathful Advance. I then also used the new Arcane Crepuscular in combination with this Shade Prime build to stay invisible while casting my abilities most of the time. This build felt very nice to play as it has a lowish amount of inputs, which is the playstyle I prefer. On the primary and secondary, I advise using the Rauta to quickly build up your combo whenever you lose it, and the Compressa or the Epitaph to quickly prime high priority targets with Viral for massive damage. Utilization of the Dexterity Arcanes will also offer massive quality of life to this build. Another final option is using the Grimoire on your secondary slot for additional ability strength, with secondary Fortifier to grant Overguard for an extra layer of survivability. I also used some Archon Shards for casting speed, ability strength, and energy maximum. Using all of this synergized together, you are able to, in a perfect scenario of course, hit damage cap numbers. The final note that I want to put in here is that Slash Dash will snapshot any active buffs whenever you cast it and will not update the damage if new buffs are activated during the casting animation. So make sure you have all of your buffs active before you start slashing and dashing. Now we move on to the next Pseudo-Exalted ability, which is Gara's Shattering Lash. Before I delve into this, I want to mention that another Warframe YouTuber named Asian Invasions released a video covering how melee Doughty makes Shattering Lash a lot better, and I highly recommend you watch this video if you are interested. Gara's Shattering Lash is her first ability. Shattering Lash has two different casting types. The first is a quick cast that deals 800 puncture damage at base with a 10 meter range, scaling with ability strength and range respectively. Second is the hold cast, which will swipe in a 225 degree angle, dealing 800 slash damage with a 10 meter range as well. And this will also scale with ability strength and ability range. However, the angle of the ability will not scale with ability range. Shattering Lash has a 1x crit multiplier and a 0% crit and status chance at base. As Asian Invasions covered in his video, the Ceramic Dagger with the new melee Doughty Arcane makes this Pseudo-Exalted ability incredibly powerful, especially the Slash Wave, as this will deal scaling slash procs just like Slash Dash, but now in AoE. Furthermore, this attack will knock down enemies without overguard, providing some light crowd control. For the Ceramic Dagger, I used the same status focused build as on the Slash Dash build, as this outperforms a pure crit build. This is because Shattering Lash will actually not apply a forced slash proc like Slash Dash did, thus making the 30% base status increase a lot more valuable. This will mean, however, that you will only be seeing big damage numbers if you keep up Wrathful Advance, so I would recommend some ability duration shards if you really want to invest into this build. Besides not being able to force a slash proc like Slash Dash did, it's also not able to build combo counter. So the Rauta build that I've just shown before will be very useful here to keep up your combo counter and to make sure that you are dealing maximum damage. On Gara, I used stacking of adaptation and her Splinter Storm for damage reduction to survive in low to medium level content. If you want to push really high levels, I would again advise you using a Shade or Ura's Companion to get invisibility like I've shown before. I also used Gara's Augment mod for a third ability, Spectro Siphon, for massive energy regen so that I can freely spam Shattering Lash to my heart's content. You can also use this with a Firewall Primer to massively increase the damage up front and the following slash procs that you will get afterwards. This can either be done by using the Panzerfull Pfeiler, which will provide this passively, or you can get viral procs by using the Epitaph or Compressa modded for viral. Now we finally arrive to the final Pseudo-Exalted ability, which is Khora's Whipclaw. Khora's Whipclaw is the first Pseudo-Exalted ability which will have all three IPS status effects, which stands for Impact, Puncture, and Slash. The Whipclaw will deal 300 damage base, scaling with ability strength, where the distribution between Impact, Puncture, and Slash is even, meaning 100 impact damage, 100 puncture damage, and 100 slash damage. It has a base 10 meter range with a 5 meter AoE, both scaling with ability range. However, the radial damage range is actually capped at a 200% ability range. Whipclaw has more base stats than all of the other Pseudo-Exalteds, with a 25% crit and status chance at base and a 2x crit damage multiplier. This makes it a lot less reliant on the base stat increases that the Ceramic Dagger usually provides, meaning that the Magistar Incarnon is in general the better option to use as a stat stick. And in my opinion, this even stays this way after the introduction of Melee Doughty. This is because you cannot mod for other elemental types when you are using Melee Doughty, as it will skew the base damage types, leading to lower crit damage multiplier values, as I've explained in my Doughty video as well. This means that for me personally, I went with a Magistar Incarnon stat stick, also utilizing the Magus Aggress on my operator again. I then chose the critical chance and critical damage increases on the Magistar Incarnon perk. I modded for toxin damage, base damage, critical damage, and critical chance. And to get even further increases to elemental damage, I used melee exposure. If you want massive damage, you can again opt for Wrathful Advance subsumed onto Khora. However, usually the damage is more than enough for low to medium level play, allowing you to choose abilities more focused on energy sustain. Here, I personally like using Lykat's Hunt from Varuna. If you, however, still want to use Melee Doughty and the Ceramic Dagger Incarnon as a stat stick, it's advised to build for a higher status chance and a slash weighting on Whipclaw by using the Buzzkill mod. However, this build more or less requires Wrathful Advance to make use of the critical damage increase that you will get from Melee Doughty again. When building for status, Slash will be most useful, as other elemental types will always deal 50% of Whipclaw's damage as status procs. I want to note that Khora can also use her accumulating Whipclaw augment, which adds damage additively to the same multiplier as ability strength. Hence why a lot of Khora builds actually use negative strength, as this mod is able to recoup that loss. Finally, Khora's Whipclaw damage can be increased by another 200% when casting it on enemies affected by her Ensnare ability, and it will deal 50% of the total damage dealt to all enemies entangled in her Strangledome if you hit an enemy affected by this ability. The latter will make the cap of the radial damage of 200% ability range a lot less noticeable. And that's pretty much all you need to know to fully utilize Warframe's Pseudo-Exalted melee abilities. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. Also, if this video was useful to you, please make sure to hit that like button to help me out. As always, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye. As always, thanks to all channel members for supporting the channel. If you are looking to become a member, please find the join button below the video.